If you're following along with me, you know that it's Pants Pattern Drafting Month at J. Stern Designs. And this is the third method I'm going to be testing for pants draft. So I'm going to talk about the pants draft in a minute, and make sure you hang out because I have a really good tip. If you're following along with me and you're trying different drafting methods, I have figured out how I can fine-tune my own measurements by looking at my drafts. So hang on for a second, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But getting to this book, before I dive into what I think about the pants draft section, I feel like this book is a little bit of a kinder version than the Helen Joseph Armstrong book. Now, that might be a funny way to say it, but I taught fashion design, and I have several copies of the Helen Joseph Armstrong drafting book, which I do consider my Bible for drafting. It's got anything and everything in there. So if I want to, draft something, I go there first to look. However, it's got a lot of information in there, and some of it assumes that you have some background in drafting. So it's not as user-friendly as I found paging through the basics of pants drafting for fashion design by Nick Verreos and David Paul. I found this book to be a little bit more user-friendly. I like the fact that there are photographs for almost every step. So instead of looking at line drawings in the Helen Joseph Armstrong book, there's photographs, there's more tips, there's more suggestions, and I like the flow from draping the pattern to truing it up to sewing it together and testing it. Just very easy to follow along. So you notice I said draping. That's the one thing about this book. If you don't have a dress form that you can drape on, you can still use this book to work on bodices and skirts, but you're going to need a personal pattern. So there is no flat pattern drafting for the bodice or the skirt in this book. He drapes them on a dress form. So if you have a good friend like Dottie, you're going to be in heaven with this book, because you can take your body double or your dress form's measurements, follow along, and develop a personal sloper, a bodice, and a skirt. Once you have those pieces, then he shows you how to make the torso. Then he shows you how to go from a darted foundation to a dartless foundation, which is very cool. And then he takes all of those shapes, and he shows you how to make facings. There's a whole chapter on how to make a facing for your torso block. And that way, you'll have those pieces if you're going to take your torso block and make it into a sheath dress, which is another chapter. It's just very easy to follow along. He shows you how to draft things like button plackets and collars and cuffs. Just very, very detailed. And then once you have your basic set, he has a whole slash and spread chapter where he shows you how to manipulate your darts in so many different ways. So in addition to how to rotate darts almost anywhere on the bodice, he also shows you how to slash and spread to make things like cowls, gathers, and fullness. So I really love this book for these reasons. His dart elimination chapter is very cool because he shows how to, get rid of darts and then create gathers, a whole collar section, various different colors, all kinds of colors. And he has a whole skirt chapter, so you can take that sloper you started with in the beginning and use it to design endless designs in this book. So he's got a whole skirt chapter on how to make, from your straight skirt to an A-line to a flare, and then gores, gathers with yokes, all sorts of fun in here for skirts. And then there is a sleeve chapter. So you can take your basic sleeve. Now, while the bodice and the skirt were draped in the beginning of the book, the sleeve was drafted. So there is a sleeve draft that goes along with the draped bodice in the beginning of the book. Then you can take that sleeve And you could create all sorts of different designs with that. I think it's very cool. And there's a lot of different sleeve ideas in here. And then, super exciting, he's got a section dedicated to the Raglan Sleeve top, my favorite pattern. So you can draft your Raglan Sleeve top right off of your personal pattern, and he shows how to do it step by step. Kind of the way that I drafted mine. This book is really speaking to me in terms of, how he's doing this in here. So, different things for the Raglan Sleeve. And then he has kimono. Once you get to a Raglan Sleeve, then he goes to the let's attach the sleeve to the bodice with the kimono. And then at the end of the book, there are some pages dedicated to pants. I'm always interested in the fact that here are the pants pages, and here is everything else. So you can see, if you want to design lots of tops, skirts, and dresses, you have endless opportunities in this book. And then the pants section is a little bit more brief, but I really love the way it's set up. So you can see here, I've started the pants draft, and I think I will be finishing this during Fab Fit Friday. So join me for that. And, going on, if you're watching this and it's like later in the year or after the fact, I will put a link to where I show how to draft out of this book so you can easily get to it if you're interested. But this feels like home to me. And the one thing I will say is I learned to connect points, A to B, C, D, E, F, G. You label every point that you draw or every part of your draft, and this goes along with that. So when you get to the pants section, he shows you how to measure, and he considers the difference between the front and back hip. So that is already a nice change compared to other standard drafting techniques where you take your hip and you just quarter it, half for the front, a quarter for the front and a quarter for the back. He actually has you take your personal measurement so you can get a hip that matches your shape. And for me, I'm using my tummy measurement, and it's bigger in the front than it is in the back. So my hip block up here is already shaped for me. So I found that very cool. And if you want to just practice drafting along in this book and you don't want to worry about measurements, he gives you measurements along the way for a size 4. Okay, and he tells you that in the beginning. And you certainly can follow along with that, or you can plug in your own measurements. So of course, I'm plugging in my own measurements so I can test this draft compared to the Jan Minot and Don McCunn books that I did earlier in the month. But here is something I'm going to try. Now I had my my crotch depth measurement that I used for the drafts, and on my crotch depth that I measured on my body, let me just look and see, waist to crotch was 12 inches that I measured when I tried to take that as a body measurement. But then what I decided to do is look at my two drafts and where the crotch is compared to the Jan Minot and the Don McCunn. So take a look at my front view of these two drafts, and I went back and I measured the patterns for these drafts where the crotch ended up, and I like where the Don McCunn version crotch is on my body. So I went back and I measured my side seam to crotch on that pattern, and it was 11 3/4. So instead of using my 12-inch body measurement, I'm using 11 3/4. So it's just a tad shorter. The other thing that this method does not account for, but I wanted to check that, is the ankle to inseam measurement. So you'll notice right here, my inseam is a generous 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 inch away from my crotch. And for trousers, that's about where I'd want it to be. So I'm very interested I find that very interesting. So I brought my crotch depth down to where I liked it from the Don McCunn draft. I used my full hip that I've been using. And the other things I'm noticing right out of the gate is instead of using the half measurement at the hip for the crotch extension in the back, we use a third. So that's going to be interesting to see how that fits because I'm used to more of a half of the full hip in the back. And also remember, my half hip is a 1/4 inch smaller than my front. So that means my front crotch extension is going to be a little bit longer than I'm used to. It worked out to be 2 7/8, and my back worked out to be, it looks like about 3 3/4 here. So that's going to be interesting to see. There is a X measurement, which is halfway between waist and crotch, front and back. I put that there, and I marked it in red because it's the X measurement, and I haven't gotten to that step yet. So you can find out what X is all about on Friday. But I just wanted to share this book because I was really delighted looking through it and seeing how you can develop from a draped bodice and skirt, drafted sleeve, and then you use those slopers to create everything else except the pants. So I thought that that was very, very cool. And I really like, again, you know, the basic sewing section. So if you're new, one of the things about drafting is if you draft your own pattern, it doesn't come with instructions. So I think having those sewing instructions is really important. If you want to get on board and start drafting with me, this is another really good modern take on drafting. So if you're interested in giving that a try, check the link below for my Amazon affiliate link. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below and I will help you. If you're enjoying my content, consider liking and subscribing to my channel because it helps me grow. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching.